I'm putting the recording on. Okay, so uh, we are live. Recording is on, and we are all set. Fantastic.
All right, I'm here.
Right, so it's time. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone that you are in. Namaste, Sat Shri Akal, Adab, welcome, hi friends. So we are back again in the next episode of the live chat. Live chat is a series of live chat shows. The live chat is a series of live chat shows on any subject related to or affecting the quality of life. So we had done an introductory chat about 2 weeks back where I introduced what are the various aspects of life, what we will be talking about in this live chat. Last Sunday, we did our first chat on the road to fitness. Last Sunday was also the day when we launched our group, the live chat. The group is now 1 week old, and I'm very happy to share that we have crossed 1,500 membership in 1 week's time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining and making a very, very vibrant group. I'm amazed at the quality of posts, at the quality of comments, and how enthusiastically people are participating in it. Thank you very much. And we want this group to grow, and bigger and bigger, and so that we can all help each other. We can learn from each other's experience. And at the outset, I want to thank, my friends, Dr. Girish Pandit, first of all, who was the brain behind the group. The group was launched on his suggestion, and he has been, really steering it in the right way. Then my other co-admins and moderators, Dr. Nidhi, Anupma Garg, Dr. Manpreet, Kaushiki Divedi, Priyanka. Thank you very much, all of you. You've been great help, and you're making the group really very, very vibrant. Today, we are going to be talking about further, the next step on the series on fitness. So we talked about basics last time, but today will be more advanced conversation on cardio and strength training, making sense of the technicality. So there are a lot of technicalities which come into strength training or the fitness training when you go a little further deeper into it. And we are joined by three amazing guests in today's conversation who are really an expert in their field. And let me start with the very first one, the super charming young lady, Riti Sahai. Riti Sahai wears many, many hats. She's a successful entrepreneur. She runs a chain of, saloons. She's a goddess on the running track. She has done so many half marathons and marathons. She's done the most, coveted one, the Boston Marathon. She's a marathoner. She's a fitness fanatic and certified functional trainer. She's an endurance cyclist. See, I first got to know about her in a cycling group. I saw her cycling, and she's amazing on the bikes. She's in a high altitude mountaineer. She has done Everest Base Camp. She has done, I think, the Island Peak or the Friends Peak. She has done a few peaks which are 6,000 meters plus in Ladakh, including the Stoke Kangadi. And I missed the chance to go with her on one of the treks when I had the opportunity to, but I'm looking forward to in the future. She has her own, she's mom to three beautiful dogs, and these are you can see the picture on one of them. And she's the captain of Adidas Runners Delhi group, where she inspires and motivates and coaches the runners in the NCR. So I think Delhiites know her very well. She's a very popular figure in Delhi circles now. And as I said, that she's run the world's three major, most coveted marathons, including the Boston Marathon. Now, she'll be sharing her experience and her expertise with us. So we'll hear more about running, cycling, mountaineering from her. After the super stylish Riti, we have got super fast Sikh Sandeep Singh. He holds the record of finishing ADH, that is the 8.5 marathon in 1 hour 26 minutes. That's his personal best. He's amazing guy. He's amazing fast, and he knows about the technicalities of running in such great depth that you will be amazed. I once, put a question to him on whether it should be cadence or should be stride. He said, give me some time to answer this question. 2 days later, I received a 3-page long presentation on the technical or the science of running. I was amazed by his knowledge. Professionally, he is from the IT background. He's a mechanical engineer from IIT Delhi and holds MBA from IIM Kozhikode. He's a director with strategy and sustainability practice in Accenture. And as I said, that he's got this flair for mechanics and passion for running. And recently he did 100 half marathons in straight 100 days to create awareness about clean air. A big feat, and I have not heard of anybody else in India who has done anything similar like that. So 100 half marathons in 100 days. I've heard of somebody doing 30 full marathons in 30 days and running across, I think, Nepal or Himalayas. But 100 half marathons in 100 days, probably he holds the record of being the first one to do so. He's also the US brand ambassador for TomTom. So after the super stylish and the super fast, we got super strong Rahul Raghuvanshi. You can look at this picture and you can look at his biceps, and when he lifts in the gym, he owns a few Anytime Fitness gyms, and he's a platinum level personal trainer, and I have seen him train people and train himself. I don't go anywhere close to him. He's so powerful, he's so strong, he's an amazing guy, and the way he lifts weight is unbelievable. He is managing 2 of the Anytime Fitness gyms. He's got expertise in weight loss, strength, conditioning, nutrition, and muscle building. So he'll be talking more about strength training and muscle building to us. But before we go any further, I'd like to call in my co-host Anupma to set some ground rules so that let us know that how people can ask questions, how people can interact with us. Anupma, can you please come in?
Thanks, Dr. Dhawan. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So Dr. Dhawan will be speaking to the guests in the first part, and I will request all of us to sort of mute our screens and voices, which I think all of us are already used to. We've done enough Zoom calls, but the idea is that we stream it as smoothly as possible. The next thing is your questions. We will request you at a certain time to share your questions either in the chat or by in your hand. We request you to not type in your questions in the chat box before that so that we don't lose out and we don't miss any questions in the chat stream. And we will first take the questions that have been typed. We will next take the questions that are from the participants who want to ask their questions live by raising their hands. We'll try and address as many questions as possible in the call, but whatever remains, we'll take it up on the group with the guests. That's broadly it. Back to Dr. Dhawan.
Thanks, Anupma. Thank you very much for helping us out. So last week we talked about how to start the fitness journey. There is something called cardio, there's something called strength, there's some talk about nutrition, some talk about rest and recovery. So we'll be delving in detail on 2 subjects, that is the cardio and strength. We had heard this story in my childhood. There was this बंदर था एक और एक हाथी की स्टोरी थी. And बंदर और हाथी दोस्त होते हैं और वो पिकनिक के लिए जा रहे होते हैं. And they always keep having constant argument. बंदर कहता है कि हाँ कि मैं ज्यादा अच्छा हूँ, मैं तेज भागता हूँ, मैं अच्छा हूँ, और हाथी कहता है मैं स्ट्रांग हूँ, बहुत बड़ा, मैं ज्यादा अच्छा हूँ. So they keep having this argument कि हाँ कि who's better. And there's no conclusion to that. So when they're walking down in a jungle, they come across a river. Now river has to be crossed. River is very, very fast. So हाथी जो है smiles. बंदर से कहता है चल आधा मेरी पीठ पे आधा, ठीक है, river cross करते हैं. And the bandar climbs onto his feet and the hathi crosses the river and takes him. And then the hathi asks, क्यों बेटा बता, ठीक है, तू अच्छा कि मैं अच्छा हूँ? Monkey कहता है, okay boss, you are strong, you are big, you help me cross the river, so you are definitely much better than I am, And then they go down further, and they come across, they felt, a little thirsty and hungry, and there were coconut trees over there. So हाथी कहता है यार बहुत भूख प्यास लगी है, क्या किया जाए? कोकोनट खाए जाए. ठीक है, हाथी ऊपर देखता है, उसकी सूंड नहीं पहुंचती कोकोनट तक. बंदर smiles now. Bandar quickly hops onto this tree, climbs up the tree, goes up and starts dropping the coconuts on elephant's head and comes down and says, क्यों बेटा हाथी बता, तू अच्छा कि मैं अच्छा हूँ? So they say, okay, well, let us reach a compromise. that both are good. We've got our own specialties, we got our own purpose, we got our own strengths, you know. So Bandar is tez, Hathi is bada or strong, you know. So Bandar denotes the cardio, the fast thing, and Hathi denotes the strength, you know, or the bulk thing. So to be actually fit, we need both. We need both to be fast and to be strong. So we need both cardio and the strength. So cardio denotes activity or exercises which are fast, high pace, which make you breathless, which make your heart pound faster, you know. Whereas the strength training is which makes you lift heavier weight, do stronger work, increases the force and the capability, you know. But with more light on this, I'll ask our experts now. Let me start with Sandeep Singh. So what exactly is cardio and what exactly is strength training?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Dhawan. And first of all, thanks for setting the context and already letting me know that I'm the bandar on this show. No, but yeah, I mean, before I get into that, I think let me just take this opportunity to thank you for having me here. It's a topic very close to my heart, and I'm really excited about the prospect of speaking with you, the panelists, and all the others who are listening to us at this point in time. So thank you very much. But coming to your question, I think cardio is important, and it's a kind of training which makes your heartbeat go kind of on the higher side and provides the right stimulus for the body to be functioning at elevated heart rates. Now, why is it important? I think one of the key reasons or one of the key considerations which restricts the performance of any athlete is to be able to produce energy at the right intensity levels. So talk about any sport, you're talking about, let's say, cricket or golf or soccer or table tennis or basketball or running or swimming, whatever sports you're talking about, very often you will find that the athletes have to be performing those activities at elevated intensity levels, which means that they have higher heart rate at that point in time when they're performing their sport. And that is where the ability to be able to produce energy, which is required to perform those actions, becomes critical. And that's where cardio training comes into play. It's basically the same, it's a kind of training which trains your muscle. The muscle happens to be the special muscle in this case, which is your heart. And if you really think about what happens inside the body when one is doing all these activities, basically it's a very simple phenomenon, which is something which really operates like a machine. Human body is a machine. And then you perform energy to those activities. Now, primarily, the body performs those activities through two kind of ways of producing energy. There is one way which is more aerobic, which is something which requires the body to be able to provide the right supply of oxygen to be able to generate those energy levels. And then there is another pathway, which is the anaerobic, which doesn't necessarily require oxygen to be able to produce energy. Now, the key thing is that anaerobic way of producing energy is something that can only sustain energy generation for about 2 minutes for activities which run up to 2 minutes. Anything above that, anything which requires you to be performing for higher durations than that, requires you to be producing energy aerobically. And that's where
We seem to have lost Sandeep. I think his network is probably not. Can anyone else hear him?
Dr. Dhawan, did I lose you?
I think I lost you. I don't know whether others lost you or not. No.
Yes, Sandeep, we did miss you a little.
Okay.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
I hope
Go
you
ahead.
can hear me.
Yes, we can now.
So I was explaining that how there are these two different pathways through which the body produces energy. And this is just a way for us to be able to provide the right stimulus. Cardio training is a way for us to be able to provide the right stimulus for the body to function more efficiently at elevated heart rates. Essentially, what it means is that as you become more stronger in terms of your cardio, it really means that the body is becoming more efficient, the heart is becoming more efficient to be able to supply blood to the working muscles at elevated heart rates. And that is what really sustains you being able to perform those activities at the right intensity levels. Now, a lot of times we do this kind of a training just with the objective of getting better as athletes in different sports. But once you start to improve, once you start to become better and more efficient with respect to your cardio, it is something which helps you in the usual day-to-day activities as well. You will feel less lethargic, you will feel more active, you will feel more, for the lack of a better phrase, you will feel a spring under your feet. That energy level just rises and you don't feel fatigued out so easily. So those are the kind of, at a very high level, benefits of cardio training.
So what are the different sports and activities where each of these trainings have a role to play? So which are the conditions where cardio has a better role to play? Which are the conditions where strength has a better role to play?
Yeah. So I think the key question really is that which are the activities which require you to be working at elevated heart rates. So for example, something like running, something like basketball, these are very high intensity activities, very short time frame. For example, something like a basket, you have to be moving, you have to be very agile, you have to be jumping around. So some activities like those, which require you to be working at elevated intensity levels are the ones which require you to be more efficient with respect to your cardio. And here again, I think the key question is that are you able to provide the right stimulus for that kind of a training? A lot of times what I have seen is that when people train for cardio activities, they don't necessarily think about what heart rates are they performing at, what heart rates are they kind of allowing themselves to elevate just so that they are able to improve. So for instance, let me just give you a very small example. If you're trying to become a better marathon runner, if you're trying to become a better ultra runner, which is something which requires you to be running for long durations, like let's say more than 4 hours or 5 hours, you do not necessarily want yourself to be improving very high activities. You don't want to be very much in the range of, let's say, 180 to 190 beats per minute kind of a heart rate. That's something which is more important for a trainer, for an athlete who is going to train for, let's say, a sprint, for a 400 meter sprint, for a 800 meter sprint. If you are working for something which is a long distance activity or something which sustains over a period of time, you probably need a better aerobic base. You probably need more volume in your training, as compared to a sport which is, let's say, a short duration sport, something like, let's say, a 90 minutes or a 60 minutes or a 30-minute sport, where intensity levels go very high. I mean, even if you think of something like a cricket, if you're training for something like a test cricket, which is slightly slow moving, which is slightly more prolonged in terms of the duration, probably the kind of cardio training that you would need to do, the kind of workouts that you would need to do would be very different as compared to what it would be if you were training for, let's say, a T20 match, just because of the intensity levels. And that's where you see a lot of this focus that has come into play in terms of the yo-yo tests and all these kind of new tests which the cricketers have to go through even before they qualify to be in the team. So that's the kind of difference, that's the kind of nuance that one needs to be aware of when you're training for any kind of an activity. So, simple answer to your question is, it really depends on the intensity level and the duration of the sport.
Right. So basically, in say, to summarize this, that cardio training works more for sports which are high intensity sports, where for this fast activity involved. And within the cardio training, there are various subsets, the various divisions, depending on the type of nature of your sport that you are in. If you are in a very highly intense sport lasting a short duration, maybe you have to work more on the anaerobic training part. Whereas if the sport is fast but for a prolonged duration, then the aerobic part has to be more strong, and the endurance has to be worked upon. So
absolutely,
yeah. So next is that, see, your main sport is running, which is actually punishment for other sports. So tell us about running. How to start running?
I think the simplest answer to that question is that just lace up your shoes and go out run. But since we are talking about technicalities, I must elaborate a little further. See, Dr. Dhawan, what happens is that running is a sport which typically tends to be a long duration sport. You have seen people who run for 30 minutes. You have seen people who run for 1 hour, 2 hours. So this is a long duration sport. And it's very critical to really understand that when we were talking about aerobic and anaerobic, how does that concept play out in the construct of, let's say, a sport like running? Now, very simply speaking, there are two things that one needs to be aware of when you think about running as a sport in the context of cardio training. That is your lactate threshold and your VO2 max. I think these are the two things that one needs to be aware of when you're talking about running. Now, what really are these two different paces? Lactate threshold is the pace at which you can run. Up till that point, the body will primarily produce energy through aerobic pathways, through the use of oxygen, which is getting delivered to the muscles from the heart. So up till the point of lactate threshold, it's mostly about aerobic pathway, which helps you create energy for the running actions. If you go beyond that, that is the point when, in a very significant way, the transition starts happening from aerobic to anaerobic. You start to feel more and more breathless. And that is where you rely a little more on, let's say, an anaerobic way of producing energy, which happens in the absence of oxygen. And then there is a pace called VO2 max pace. And if you go beyond that, primarily the body will not be able to support the motion just by aerobic pathway. You will have to rely on anaerobic pathway to be able to produce energy. Now, Now, it's important to note that if you are running at a pace which is more than VO2 max pace, you're relying on anaerobic way of energy producing. And as I said, this is something that can sustain you only for up to 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. It cannot take you further beyond that. Think of it like a reserve in an automobile. You have run out of fuel, and this is a reserve that you're relying upon, which won't last you for a very long time. You will have to fix it very quickly. And when you're training for a long distance run, it's important that you make sure that you provide yourself the right stimulus. And that's where I think I have seen a lot of runners who tend to go out for training runs, let's say 3 or 4 days in a week. And each of their runs tends to be very similar to the other run. There isn't any variation in terms of the paces that they run at, the distances that they run, the durations at which they run. And that's where, some kind of a stagnation starts to creep in their performance. Now, in my opinion, and as much as I've read and, experienced about this sport, if you're trying to improve your pace, if you're trying to improve your performance, I think the single most important variable that you need to be able to provide stimulus for is your lactate threshold. Lactate threshold, as I said, is the point up to which aerobic pathway is the primary source of energy. And to be able to provide that right stimulus, what happens is that you have to be running at a pace which is slightly slower than that pace. So for instance, if I were to take my own example, the lactate threshold pace for me happens to be about 4 minutes, 5 seconds per kilometer. And if I'm trying to improve that pace, if I'm trying to make that pace something like, let's say 3 minutes, 55 seconds per kilometer, I need to be running slightly slower than 4 minutes, 5 seconds per kilometer, which is something like, let's say 4 minutes, 10 seconds per kilometer, 4 minutes, 15 seconds per kilometer, for example. If I can provide that stimulus, if I can run, let's say about 20 to 25 minutes after a proper warm up at a pace which is just marginally lower than the lactate threshold pace, then I am providing myself the right stimulus to be improving my lactate threshold pace, which will help me reduce my time over half marathons, reduce my time over full marathons, get faster, get quicker. But oftentimes what happens is that in a quest to become stronger and faster, we believe that every time we have to run out in a training run, we need to be running as fast as we possibly can. But that won't work. And I have myself made that mistake for almost 3 to 4 years. I would just step out on every single lactate threshold training day, thinking that today is the day I have to do my personal best of 10K. If I do that, you know what, I have arrived in life. I am becoming faster as a runner. It just doesn't work, because that's the stimulus that you're providing yourself to improve anaerobically, which is important if you're training for a 400-meter sprint. Of course, it will have a role to play in your aerobic performance as well, but primarily it will make you a faster short distance runner. And that's where I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about the method to madness. They just tend to run at the same pace, and that's where the cardio training actually fails to deliver the benefits commensurate with the effort that they are putting in, the 3 to 4 runs that they perform every week.
So let me simplify it for my friends in the audience that first of all, regarding the heart and the lung and the running part. No? See, it's a question of, it's a demand and supply. When you're running, your muscles are constantly contracting, relaxing, and they're utilizing the energy, and utilizing the energy by utilizing oxygen. So there's a demand on oxygen supply. There's a demand on energy supply. This demand is provided by the lungs and by the heart. The lung is the source of oxygen. The heart is basically the supply chain, or the pump. It is a pump only. So when the demand increases, the supply has to increase proportionately. But there comes a point of time where the demand exceeds the supply. That is what is called the lactate threshold. Beyond that, the supply cannot meet the demand. So the muscles start tapping into the reserves. So they start working on the anaerobic area. That is that they produce energy without using oxygen. But that can last only very, very small, very short duration, because the stores are very, very limited now. So this is the basic demand supply thing. And also the second aspect is that, which Sandeep highlighted, is, there you should know that what signals you're giving to your body is important. So if you have to train and build up or elevate your lactate threshold level, you have to do aerobic training. You have to, run at a pace which is slightly below your lactate threshold. So you're telling your body, look, I'm coming very close to it. I'm coming very close to it, but I need oxygen. I need oxygen. I need oxygen. So it's not just that what you're trying to do, but also the signals that you're sending your body. Your body prepares itself for the next run, for the runs next to that. So it's important to send the right signals. And that is with the training of at this various level comes into play, that below threshold, at anaerobic threshold, or in the anaerobic training, So you already answered part of my next question, that is that how to increase your running performance. Anything else you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So one is that it's fine to talk about it theoretically. When we say that you need to be running slightly lower than the threshold, lactate threshold pace, it's easy to talk through it. But when we talk about a particular runner, it's, I think the single most important question is that what is that lactate threshold pace for you? Just as I talked about, 4 minutes 5 seconds is my lactate threshold pace. How do you really get to know your lactate threshold pace? Now, for that, I think I just want to highlight that there are a lot of empirical studies that have already been conducted. And what they do is they just look at your personal best performance in terms of, the time that you would have taken for a 5K or a 10K or a 21K. And just by looking at those timings, they can actually do what typically would be the range in which your lactate threshold pace lies. So there is no science to it. I mean, these are all based on empirical studies. And once you know that this is a typical range, then it's a lot about really getting those body cues, really hearing your body signals and getting a sense that, am I out of breath? Is it already reaching a stage where I cannot last this or sustain this for more than 2-3 minutes? If yes, then you know probably that you are getting into your anaerobic range. So it's a bit of really leveraging those empirical studies and listening to your body when you're on the run to get those signals in terms of what that right pace is for you. And the second thing that I think is very important is, we talked about the lactate threshold run or the lactate threshold pace. The second thing is that a typical runner who's training to become faster would primarily want to do at least 3 runs in a week. And I'm talking about trainers who have already been in this sport for a while. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, the first day that you start running, you start including 3 runs in a week. But if you have been in this sport for about a year or so and you really understand the sport a little bit and the body is used to it, you primarily want to have 3 runs in a week. One run is about lactate threshold pace, which I just talked about. A typical run would last for about 20 minutes. And it would be preceded by about 5 to 10 minutes of good warm up and 10 to 15 minutes of a good cool down. So in all, you're talking about a 40-minute run, in which 20 minutes is the high intensity work which you do at lactate threshold pace. So that's one run that you need to do. The second run, which is probably the most famous run in our running communities, is a long, slow distance run. This is a run in which you just go slow at a pace which feels comfortable, which feels something that you can sustain for fairly long duration, something like 2 hours or more. And as a rule of thumb, the long slow distance run pace would typically be about 2 minutes or more slower than your lactate threshold pace. So for instance, if my lactate threshold pace is 4 minutes 5 seconds per kilometer, my LSD run or the long slow distance run pace would be as slow as at least 6 minutes 5 seconds, 6 minutes 10 seconds per kilometer, maybe even further slower. And this is the pace in which you can just go have a conversation with your friends, just feel the environment around you, just be on the feet for about 2 hours. This provides the right kind of a stimulus to be able to activate the muscle groups when you're really going for a long distance performance like a marathon. So it is not so much about your aerobic capacity. This is more about really getting your muscles activated, getting those slow twitch muscles activated for performance over a longer duration. And then there is an aerobic run, which is something which happens to be in between the two paces. For me, example, it would be something which I run at a pace of about 5 minutes 30 seconds per kilometer. And this would be somewhere in the range of about 14 to 16 kilometers, not as long as a long slow distance run, at the same time not as short as a lactate threshold run. And the primary objective of this run is to be able to give you the right kind of a volume in your training. You cannot be building volume on the back of lactate threshold run because it's a high intensity run. It might cause injuries. It might cause a longer duration for you to recover. So this is the run which allows you to build the right kind of volume in your training. And the other one thing that I want to highlight is that when you think about this entire set of cardio training capabilities, there is almost like a pyramid that you have to think about. At the base of it, it's your aerobic capacity. At the next level, you talk about the lactate threshold capacity. Go further high, you talk about the anaerobic capacity. So you're almost trying to build a building. You're almost trying to kind of lay a foundation, build upon it, and then get really supreme at your anaerobic capacity as well. And as is typically the case, a building is always built on the foundation. So don't try to build the second floor of the building before you have laid the ground floor and the first floor. Again, a common error in our quest to become faster in the shortest span of time. Often you will find that people running at much higher paces than what their body is ready for. They will be doing much higher intensity workouts like HIITs and burpees and box jumps and all those kind of good things, great things, but there is a time to be doing that. So don't start with those. If you are new to the world of running, first lay the aerobic capacity. Do almost 80% of your runs at a pace which feels slower and relaxed. Don't have to be running fast all the time because that's a classic recipe for injury. So just think of it like a pyramid and just make sure that you do it one step at a time and take it from there.
That's a very good example to follow. So what would you suggest? So what should be a good typical running schedule or regime?
So again, I mean, there is no one size fits all approach here. It's something which needs to be customized for the body. But at a very high level, if you were to think about the right elements or the right mix of training schedule, for someone who is into the sport for about a year, your body is ready to be doing at least 3 runs in a week. Complement that with at least 2 days of strength training, wherein you are really, what Rahul is going to be talking about here, really getting the muscles and the body strengthened. Think of at least 1 day as a cross training day or a rest day. And if schedule permits, 1 day of yoga or flexibility is very important as well. So in all this, you have a complete package. It's like really solving for a jigsaw puzzle. And these are the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. You put them all together, follow a process, rest assured the results will follow.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. And I'll call Riti for the next thing. Riti, he's talked fantastic about running part now. But one thing that we have not touched so far is where to run on the road, to run on the track, or run on the trail. And you have the experience of doing running in all these things phenomenally well. So why don't you tell us about where to run and what is the importance of each thing? Your mic is, you need to unmute your mic. Let's wait.
Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, so I would think that choosing a surface is very important also for running, because a lot of us, like Sundeep said, get carried away initially when we start out as runners,
Right.
and most of us want to just hit the road, just start and say do the number of kilometers you want to do, and we don't think about where we're running, and we just end up running only on the road. So yeah, I think that's extremely important also from a point of view of injuries, because running is a very high impact sport. So, when we start out, I would think it should be a mix of soft trails and tarmac, or the road, because I know road, while for most of us is easily accessible. So I'm not saying don't go out and run on the road, but try and find a park around your area, which is soft surface, the red mud or grass, and try and alternate between these. So that's something that I would say for, runners that start out running, because just running on the road is also not great. The other thing is trail running is fantastic too, but I see a lot of people, again, start out running on trails. I would think gradually move towards trail running, because again, trail running is not, even surface, it's uneven, you're going up and down, there's gradient, there's higher risk to injuries. So you need to be able to have that balance as a runner, or, to be able to take that call when you want to go run a trail. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a different experience. Your pace varies when you're running on the road versus running on a trail. So there's lots of factors that need to be taken into account. And most of us are amateur runners. So for an experience, I would say it should be a mix of all. Not just doing one thing at a time or always is ideal for the body, for your knees, for your legs. And also depends on the access. Most of us live in a city like Delhi. So like I said, roads are the easiest access. But because running is high impact, I would say, try and, or if you have an access to a stadium where you have, the track, running track. So it's easier on the knees in that comparison. So try and do a mix of this is what I'd say, between trail, between road, and what was your third? I'm sorry?
The track, the road, and the trail. Three things.
Yeah. So, it should be actually a mix. When you're doing your speed, it should be over on a track or the grass. I mean, it's harder on grass and on the track, but then when you're out there to race, on D-Day, you'll do a better job, So speed should be done on these two. Your long, slow distance that we talked about can be done on the road, because it's conversational place. You're not going very fast. So, that you can do on the road. And trail runs, I would say, again, to build endurance, all of that, because you go far slower in comparison because of the gradient, the uneven pace, and stuff like that. So it should ideally be a mix, but one must be mindful of choosing the paths that you run on or the track that you run on.
That's fantastic. That's the right message to take home, that, there should be variety. There should be variety of surfaces now, and not just a variety of surfaces between road, track, and trail. I will add one more thing to it, that we do mostly, I do LSD, or a long distance run on the road now. Yeah. Make sure that you're not running at the same part of the road every time, because if you're running on the same side of the road has got a certain degree of banking. your feet, your knee, your ankle are getting the same angle of impact each time. It will lead to an imbalance on the two sides. So switch to the other side of the road, switch to a different road. Sometimes it will be flat area, sometimes it will be banked area. So bring in variety there also. Don't run at the same road, on the same path, on the same inclination all the time. Sandeep said that, the easiest way to start running is lace up your shoes and go for a run. No. When do you say, okay, unlace your shoes and go for the run?
The other thing that I'd like to add there is, of
Yeah.
course, talk brilliantly about VO2 max, lactate threshold, and stuff like that, which I think most runners are aware of now. And I would say that, it's good to know the technicalities and work around those, of course, because we all want to improve performance. And there's a method to the madness, which he very beautifully talked about. But what I also want to talk about is, we should not scare the new runners. These technical terms and the data. I mean, let's not be running data driven is my way of looking at it. We're all amateur runners. So, I would like to encourage everybody out here who's listening to say, like he said, lace up your shoes or just have that will to step out of the door and go out and run and just be consistent. Go out and do it for a certain number of minutes, twice, thrice a week, form that habit. And slowly and gradually, you will get to all of this that Sandeep talked about and improve performance. Right now, like I said, just go out there and enjoy. I mean, all of this will fall in place. Your pace will fall in place. Your VO2 max will fall in place. But I would like to say that this is a sport which, we all don't learn. It's innate. It's, where we know it's about putting one foot in front of the other. So it's probably the easiest thing to pick up. And there is no right age to run. I started running when I turned 33. So what I also want to say, considering
Have we lost Riti? I can't hear Riti.
I think she got disconnected.
Okay, so Riti, are you there? I think she's still struggling.
So while you're
with
waiting for her,
connection.
Dr. Sanjay, I think what
So-
she's
so,
saying is a very good
yeah,
point.
Yes,
It's good to be scientific. It's good to be methodical, but there is always a right stage for everything. So, for
Yeah.
example, if I were to talk about my own example, the first time I wore a watch while running, just to be able to monitor my pace or my heart rate, etc., was after 4 years of having started running. Before that, it used to be just go out and run. So
Is it-
absolutely.
Don't you think 4 years is the time when they should be able to take your watch off and all?
So maybe in my case it was a little prolonged, but I think it's important not to just get too what should I say, muddled up in all these nuances.
Electronics
Sometimes it's
and
good.
stuff,
Absolutely, lactate thresholds, VO2 maxes, cadence, stride turnover, all of these things will follow. But it's important to really enjoy the sport, and we are not professional runners, as she called it. We are more amateurs, so it's more important to just enjoy the sport.
Looks like Riti is still running out of the walk. She's lost her track. Let her come back. But before while she comes back, I'm going to ask Rahul to come in. That Rahul, what is strength training and how to start strength training?
Okay. Hi, sir. First of all, thanks for inviting me this amazing show. It's going really well, and I'm enjoying every weekend. Is like this is my second attendance to this show. So let's talk about the strength training in a very simple language. It's like performing any of the exercise against the resistance to improve the muscular strength. So this is how the strength training comes up in. It's very simple. It's like, when you are training against the strength, it's called a strength training to strengthen up the musculoskeletal system. So that's what the strength training is. And when we talk about how to start, first of all, we should start moving. People these days are very sedentary. They don't move, they sit throughout the day. And that's what creating a lot of muscle imbalances. Their posture deviations are there. A lot of posture deviations are there. So to start is like, first of all, they should feel active rather than going in an office and sitting on a sitting chair. They should just prefer going for a standing chair and just be active, standing throughout the day. More and more, the more they will be active in a day, the more lesser imbalances will be there. Muscle imbalances will be there. And then let's talk about a little bit more into the technicality part. I believe, first of all, consult a coach because strength training is slightly injury prone. So first of all, get your assessment done. See where exactly you're standing. As far when we talk about the strength training, there are many parts of strength training. The first one is the stability and the mobility of your joints. If your joints are not stable, if your joints are not mobile, you won't be able to perform any kind of strength training. If you're having a balancing issue, if you're having a flexibility issue, then you will definitely be having injury chances are much more into the strength training. So first, a good trainer, contact a good trainer. The good trainer will assess your body, will check if the muscle imbalances are there, if a posture deviations are there, if a core stability is struggling, or where exactly your strength is coming up, is like standing at this moment. So there are different stages into the strength training. The first one is the stability and the mobility of a joint and flexibility. The second is the movement, learning the movements. These days, people forget how to squats because we don't go beyond than this chair throughout the day. So if you tell anybody to squat, the chances are there that he or she might fall down, or the neuromuscular system, the central nervous system completely forgotten like how to squat. So the movement training is the second part. Then the moment the person gets settled into the movement training, then the progression is towards the load. Then the load is also having a 3 parts to go for. The muscle endurance is the first part. It take like 4 to 6 weeks to get your muscles completely trained under the endurance part. Then the hypertrophy is the second part of a load training. And then the strength training is the third part of a load training. The moment you take progression towards all these parts from endurance to the hypertrophy, then the strength, then the time is come up to perform into the performance training, which is a top level of athletic conditions. So if you ask me where to start, please consult your coach, consult a good qualified coach who can assess your body completely, who can tell you, who can present you a plan. Okay, that ma'am or sir, you are not eligible at this moment to perform any of the resistance training because there are a lot of muscle imbalances are there. You're struggling with your balances. The core stability or a joint stability is on toss at this moment. So first of all, we will be working on a core stability on the joints mobility, flexibility. The moment your stability is on spot completely, then time is to go for a movement training to learn the movement. Then your central nervous system slowly start recognizing all the movements like how to push, how to pull, how to squats. And then the moment you're settled with the movements, then slowly go for a load training where there are 3 parts. The first one is the endurance. The second one progression is the hypertrophy, and third is the strength training.
So I completely agree with you, Rahul, over there that, as the resistance training or the strength training or the weight training is something which is a new area, which is slightly outside our familiar zone. So we should not straight away jump into that because it's a high risk thing. There's a high risk of injury over there. And any injury can set you back by months, and all the progress that you achieved in weeks may get lost, Riti Sahay is back again with us. So my
I'm
next
sorry
question.
for this little connection drop at my end.
That's okay. I know. From the track, you went to the trail, You got lost in the trail now. So my question was that, the people that, what would you say that now, when would you unlace the shoes and run? There's a lot of talk about barefoot running. So what would you say? There's a fashion of barefoot running. People read the book Born to Run and everybody thinks we are the Raramuri tribe and we can run barefoot now. So tell us about that now.
My views personally, of course, I'm not in favor of barefoot running. I know a lot of people do it and they're very happy about it. And of course, they take it back to, our forefathers and those, but those days the conditions were different. The roads were different. It was not what it is today. I'm not too sure if it's something that I recommend or I preach. I mean, one can try if it works for you, great, but I'm not sure how long one can sustain barefoot running. So it's okay to do a couple of kilometers for certain other benefits over grass. As a doctor, I'm sure you can put more light to that, but long distance running bare feet is something that I don't recommend. I'm not, because, I've seen people prone to a lot of injuries, blisters, and it's not something that you can do over a long period of time. It's not something that you can sustain over a long period of time.
Correct. So you're absolutely right about all that, no? And people in this case, our forefathers used to do that. Yes, they're also right. But remember, our forefathers, when they were born barefoot, they remained barefoot. In all their childhood, they would run around, walk barefoot. In the adult age also, they would walk barefoot now. There are no pakka farsh. There's no pavimented roads. There were kacha floors, kacha road, and they were running around that barefoot. So their feet was conditioned, to stay barefoot now.
That's exactly, we evolved. I mean, we do so much else. Everything has changed. Not
our bodies are not conditioned. The moment child is born, we get them a pair of Nike and have them those shoes. It's almost like that. No, so we within the house also we don't walk barefoot. We have slippers. We have a bathroom slippers to go to the bathroom. So we are hardly ever barefoot. And then we suddenly one day we read this book Born to Run, and next we want to run barefoot. That is to be discouraged. So barefoot running is fine. Yes, our body is designed to go barefoot, but right now in the present level of civilization, we are not conditioned to run barefoot. So if you want to start barefoot running, give yourself at least a year of conditioning to go barefoot.
You know, I feel it's not safe, Doc, because where do you go and run bare feet? You know what I mean? Like there is nothing that is, you're still bound to injuries. You know, there's glass on the road, there are pebbles on the road.
Yes. So the next is
conditioning also.
So if you run barefoot, you know, it is not on the road, no, because your body was not designed to run on the road. No. It has to be on the soft trail, not even on the hard trail. It has to be on the soft trail, no. And so barefoot running with proper conditioning of the feet and the body in the right trail is fine. So Raramuri's tribe, when they would run miles for days together and eat only the corn thing, they were running on trail. They were not running on the roads. So read the book properly, have the perspective correct, you know, barefoot is fine, but done in the right way. So that brings us to the question of that shoes are very, very important. Shoes the only equipment that's required for running. So tell us about that. What is the right shoe for running, or all shoes right for running? How to choose pick a shoe, and what are the factors?
Again, I'm going to talk. I mean, I'm going to give suggestions or recommend for beginners. I mean, you can get into a lot of technicalities when you want to buy a shoe, right? But if you are starting out running, what I would recommend is you go to whichever brand you want to go to the store. Most stores do a gait analysis, which is what they make you run on a treadmill. They're professionals who do it because they know how to read your pronation. We all pronate to a certain extent. So depending on your pronation, they will recommend a shoe that fits you best. So it's ideal to buy your first pair of shoes through somebody who knows what running shoes are. So you go to your, like I said, to a store of your choice of brand, take professional help. They will recommend the worst case scenario, if you're not able to do that, ideal is to buy a neutral running shoe. The other thing that I would recommend, and a lot of people overlook, is the size of running shoes. So the shoes that I wear on a regular basis is not my running shoe size. My running shoe size is always half size or one size bigger or larger than the normal shoes that I wear. Because we don't realize, and most people come back to me and say, I'm not very happy with my shoes, I'm getting blisters, my toenails are going blue, various issues people may have. Because one doesn't realize that, the shoe size is not right. So that's something that I keep talking about and harping that, listen, it has to be at least half or one size bigger than your regular shoe that you wear. Because as you run, your foot slides forward, your feet, your fingers, your toenails, they tend to swell because you're running long distance over a period of time. So, these two are basic factors to keep in mind. Like I said, obviously comfort. So you must go into a store, unless you've been running for a while and you know exactly what works for you, what kind of shoe you need. You need more stability because of your pronation, or you need, more cushioning. Are you looking for speed shoes, which are supposed to be slightly lighter? So I guess all those details one can get into as you get or become a seasoned runner. But for a basic runner, get professional help, get into a store, get your gait analysis done, and get the right shoe. And do keep in mind the size. Like I said, it has to be at least half a size bigger. And then, of course, we can get into a whole lot of technicalities, as we grow as runners. We have a slightly more cushioning for our long distance running. So stuff like that. One can always, have 2 or 3. And the other thing, like I said, one must have 2 pairs of running shoes. You don't have the same pair of running shoes for all your runs. So even when you start out, I guess initially in the first couple of months, invest in a second pair also. And yes, like, we invest in a good phone or a good car or whatever, shoes are also an investment. So don't cut corners. At the same time, I'm not saying go all out and spend like crazy amounts of money, but a decent brand of running shoes will take you a long way. It'll keep you away from injuries. It will keep you away from a lot of issues that you may encounter otherwise if you cut corners. So just basics when you go out there to get that first pair of running shoe.
Now, I will bring you to your first love, cycling. How do you compare running with cycling?
So I would say both are equally beneficial, when it comes to cardiovascular activities. It depends on your lifestyle. I mean, some people choose running over cycling, some choose cycling over running. So it depends what you, take to what your lifestyle is. However, running is a high impact sport in comparison. Cycling is something which is a sustained stamina sport. Also when you're running, you're burning more calories in comparison, of course, and you tend to use your entire body. Whereas when you're cycling, you're mostly using your lower body. So these are the two things. So it depends on what fits your lifestyle. But I would say, one should ideally be switching between the two to reap benefits from both. I mean, that would be the ideal world. So, as a runner, you are able to cross train also. So that would be an ideal combination. But it again depends, like I said, what really fits your lifestyle, where you live, the kind of access you have for a cycling trail or the road or running. So it depends on that as well.
So when you want to start cycling out, what is your advice? What kind of bicycle to go for? What are the things to be kept in mind?
So again, there are three kinds of bikes that one can choose from. So one is a road bike, which has the real thin tires. One is the hybrid, which is a mix between a roadie and something else called the MTB, which is the mountain terrain bike. And the third is the mountain terrain bike, which is really the fat tires, So the fattest tires or the MTB is actually something that you can use everywhere and go off-road. But it's harder to ride in comparison, so, and then depends, like I said, if you want to off-road, the roads are not really even, there is enough and more gravel. The other is the hybrid bike, which is the medium-sized tires, which are again city riding, not so much for speed. Now, if somebody who's been an endurance cyclist or has been riding for a while, lives in the city and wants to start, picking up speed also, and wants to cycle only on roads, in the city roads or whatever, I would recommend a roadie. But for first timers, again, personal advice, do not go straight away for a roadie, because roadies also have a very different kind of a handle, which is called the drop bar, where you are actually slouching a little bit, so there your back is also getting strained. So when you're starting out, I would say between a hybrid or an MTB is what you should go for. Yeah. And again, depends on your budget, because cycles also come in different ranges. So it depends on your budget, so from choosing something which comes in basic metals, to if your budget allows you to go in for something fancy, which has, carbon, which is a carbon frame or a titanium frame. So all this also depends. But like I said, between the three, as long as, again, where you can ride, what is the access that you have, what are the number of kilometers you're going to, cycle every now and then. So make the decision according to that. Also, when you're starting out, I would say get a flat bar, which is when you sit on the saddle, at least your back is straighter in comparison. So there's less strain on the back. Get used to that, evolve as a cyclist, and then you can always upgrade to a roadie or to a hybrid if you start out with an MTB. So while all three are equally stable, a lot of people come to me and say, oh, this roadie doesn't look stable. It's really thin, it's featherweight. So I don't think that's the case. It's only about, like I said, you evolve to cycling at a certain speed. So, you evolve from, say, a MTB or a hybrid to buying a roadie, So gradually make that move. But yeah, it again depends between the three, what works for you, where you live, what the budgets are. But in fact, I just invested in a roadie.
Fantastic. I think your network is not very great right now. We are losing your voice in between.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Is it still bad? Is it still bad?
No, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess those were the 3-4 things that one must keep in mind to, when you're choosing that first cycle of yours.
So the cycles are into 3 types, as you said, that there's a road bike, there's a mountain bike, there's a hybrid bike. Not just there's a difference in the tire size, but also there's a difference in the frame design. There's a difference in the bar or the riding position in each one of them.
Correct.
And MTB has got a flat bar. You ride more or less upright on that. The frame is designed to be more stable and sturdy and take ups and downs of rough terrain better. So the tires are also broad. The traction is a little bit more, A road bike, on the other hand, designed for speed.
Yeah.
So the frame is more horizontal frame. It's a compromise. So there's always a bit of a balance between stability and speed. So road bikes are more designed for speed and less for stability. And so it's better to go for a mountain bike or a hybrid bike to start with, and then upgrade to other anything else. So, fantastic. So
That's again a personal experience, you know.
so of course, so Sandeep had mentioned about heart rate, so Riti, what is the role of heart rate monitoring in fitness and cycling and running and all?
You know, I feel the idea is to train your aerobic system without overstressing your skeletal and muscular systems. And heart rate training is hugely beneficial because, it can actually help us peak performance. But, we also need to understand what our maximum heart rate is, what our resting heart rate is, to be able to train accordingly. So I guess seasoned runners know this, and we always end up asking, what zone did you run in today? I'm sure Sandeep will be able to put greater light into it. But so you basically zone training, and every run, like he said in the initial part of the conversation, should be at a different zone, to max your potential to be able to perform better. So and the easiest way to figure out your maximum heart rate, of course, the ideal way to do it is in a lab, is in a sports lab, or out on the field, and a professional will come and do it. There are certain formulas and stuff like that. But what most of us use is 220 minus your age. That should be your maximum heart rate. So yeah, and then like I said, every kind of training that he talked about, tempo, intervals, so we all runners should be done in different heart rate zones. So from zone 1 to 5, to be able to achieve maximum potential. It actually will help you perform better. It will also help you stay away from overtraining. So for a certain run you're running, for example, aerobic run should be anywhere between 50 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. Your tempo runs or should be anywhere between 70 to 75% of your maximum heart rate. Your intervals could be 85% or greater than your maximum heart rate. So it all depends on what kind of training you're doing, which day. And like I said, so if we train according to our heart rate, we are at a higher, level of performance. We will be, there will be obviously better improvement as a runner. And we're not stressing our skeleton and our muscular system as well. So we're training far properly, I would say.
Correct. So basically the idea is to make people aware that yes, some heart rate monitoring is an important component of fitness training, not just the cardio, but also the strength training. And what's important is to know what is your maximum possible heart rate. Yes. The formula of 220 minus the age is a very, very empirical formula. Yes, it is okay to start with, but each one of you should put an extra effort to find out your individual maximum heart rate, for which you actually have to go out and maybe do some intense workout, monitor your heart rate, and find out what is your maximum heart rate, which may be very different from 220 minus your age. Like my maximum heart rate is much higher than what my age would suggest. So maybe my dil is slightly younger at heart. No.
So the other thing that I would like to say here is also, while I do recommend, or I do say that, heart rate training has huge benefits, yeah. But, when we start out running as new runners again, it's important to build that base. It's important to build the endurance. It's important to put in a couple of months of slow, easy runs before we get into this, heart rate training, the zone running and stuff like that. And if Sandeep wants to put in a few words, I'm sure he'll be greater at, adding lots of stuff that I may have missed out.
No, I think Sandeep has already talked a lot about the technicalities, which people will feel more scared if we add more to that. No, but so coming to this heart rate thing, fine, you use devices to measure that, but what is more important for people to know is that listen to your body.
Yes.
Don't go by electronics. Don't go by measurements. Listen to your body. Sometimes the electronics may say things differently from what your body is saying. So you have to listen to your body. Yes, you should try to go out of the comfort zone, but not too much out of it. One last question from you, Riti. Of course, I'll ask you a few more questions later on also, but what is the role of these big events, ADHM and Boston Marathon, which you have done? What is the role? Why do people go for these big events, and how does it help?
I guess as runners, as we evolve as runners, again, you want to get better and better and better. And running again I would like to clarify and say this, and I know as runners, we will all agree, running is a sport which is you versus you. So I'm not trying to be a better runner than Sandeep. As much as I would try, I know I won't be able to. So there you go, Sandeep, before I even say that or try. For me, it's about becoming a better runner every single run of mine, and a better human, evolve as a better person. So because I've been running, say for the next number of years or months, I say, okay, fine, let me go out there. It's an event, it's an official event where I'll get to test my training, or my training days, and say, okay, fine, this is what I wanted to do, and I've put in my hard work of 6 months. I always have a goal. As you, again, like I said, evolve as runners, you have goals. I mean, all of us have goals for ourselves, which are personal goals. So it's just a stamp for yourself to say, what, this year my personal best for a half marathon was so and so, and of course we do want to run those coveted events across the globe, not just within Delhi. And Boston, for example, is the Mecca Medina of a runner, for a marathoner. So, I just had to do it. It's something that gives me bragging rights, of course, also
Yeah.
as a runner. So, there are whole ways of looking at it. And the fact that I've run that course, which is supposed to be brutal. So, it depends. And of course, you graduate, you run, you do that, then you obviously go to another goal. So we have these goals as runners. So we keep ticking those boxes and say, okay, now we've done this, what next? And also what I would say, why I do these is also to go explore that city, explore that country. There's no better way to go and see another place than to go and run and explore, I would say. So, I ensure that in a year I go 2 places abroad, 2 places within India. I'm also exploring the city, meeting new people, being able to run, which is my passion. So, various things to it, I think. And it's just,
Great.
it's
That's
very fulfilling.
yeah, that's amazing. That first is that of course you test your own capabilities, your performance. Secondly, it helps you motivate, to keep running and do better. Third is it helps you explore new places and meet new people. Fantastic. Let me come back to Rahul. And we interrupted your thing. So we were talking about the strength training and how to start. How to start and how to escalate strength training.
So starting is definitely with the assessment. Escalating is like keeping a record of your progression. Like, first of all, at least 4 to 5 weeks, a person who is struggling with a muscle imbalances, stability or a mobility, a person should be training into the stability and mobility phase at least for 4 weeks.
4 weeks, okay.
Keeping a record completely. Work on your flexibility, works on your joint mobilization, work on your stability, then taking a progression towards a movement training. So the movement training, again, it will take remembering all the movements, like how to push an object, how to safely pull an object, how to bend and lift, how to squats completely. And then spend at least 3 to 4 weeks, depending on a person to person, how the person is central nervous system is adapting the movement learning so quickly. Then spend 3 to 4 weeks into the movement training, and then taking a progression towards the load training. Then the load training is also having 3 parts. The first part of a load training is muscle endurance, where the repetition will be performed at least 15 to 20 repetition. And it's almost like 57% to 67% of your 1 rep max. That is the one muscle endurance. Then again, it takes 4 to 5 weeks to spend time into the muscle endurance and understanding your lactic threshold, and then taking a progression towards the hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is a segment, like in a simpler language, hypertrophy is building up your lean muscle mass. Then again, hypertrophy needs to train at least 6 to 7 weeks into the hypertrophy segment, putting on a lean muscle mass, where you will be training 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max, and the repetition range will be 8 to 12 reps. And the resting part will be at least 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the kind of load you are taking. Then the moment you are seeing that your muscle mass is increasing, your fat percentage is dropping in, your stability is top line, and then the time is to taking a progression towards the strength training completely. And strength training is completely like 80% to 100% of your 1 rep max. But a person cannot do a strength training until unless the joints are not completely mobile, you're not flexible, there is no lean muscle mass support into your body. So the strength training will be very dangerous for you. So the good strength training need a good mobilization of joints, support of a lean muscle mass, flexibility also, and that's how you'll becoming stronger progression to progression.
So in other words, you say that it takes about 3 months to prepare your body to actually take it to a level where you can start a serious strength training.
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
So anybody who wants to delve into strength training or muscle building up or hypertrophy and all should be prepared that, okay, fine, you will not become Salman Khan in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months.
Yes.
In 3 months, you will start the path, start the journey towards becoming Salman Khan.
Exactly. Exactly.
How long does it take to become Salman Khan? Actually, let me ask you.
I like the
Sir,
benchmark.
sir, I believe we are choosing a better role model for the strength training is like an Olympic lifter,
Okay.
like, rather than Salman Khan. Salman Khan is something, okay, you can say a person with a lean muscle mass, but an
Right.
Olympic lifter is functionally fit,
Right.
is more powerful than a bodybuilder, I would
Right.
say, than a bodybuilder. So to become a good Olympic lifter, you need a good functionality to your body. You need a good core stability. You need a joint mobilization. You need a flexibility, and you need a muscle mass. So to become an Olympic lifter, I would rather say it takes at least 6 months taking a stage to stage progression. But
So,
yes, Salman
so
Khan,
basically, your message is that don't go by the appearance only. It is
Yes.
not only about the appearance, no.
Yes.
That the strength training, actually, there's more technicalities to it. No, you should look at the functionality and how you
Yes.
improve your ability and all.
Exactly.
And don't be fascinated by just the physical appearance of say latest Salman Khan. So they're better people to follow rather than the film heroes, you know. So
Sir, what's the fun carrying a lean muscle mass if you are not functionally fit?
correct.
So
Correct.
the functionality should be always top line with a strength.
So we hear about these different muscle groups and the training schedule and all. And tell us more about that.
Okay. So when we talk about the muscle groups, basically it's all depending on the functionality of the body. So the body functionality is to pull object, to push object, and bend and lift. So we have a pulling muscles, like where all the muscles works together. Like your back is completely a pulling muscle and your bicep is also a pulling muscle. So training back and biceps together will be a very smart idea on a very same day. So, and then your pushing muscles is your pectoral major, your deltoid, and your tricep. So once you're training for your chest, so your secondary muscle will be deltoid, which will be supporting, and your tricep also. So these are the muscle groups, like, working together. And then there are the bend and lifts muscle groups, which is your glutes, hamstring, and your quadriceps and your calves. So it's a very smart idea to combine the muscle groups together in your strength training, so that you can just give a proper rest to the working muscles and recover, become more stronger, and then come back to the next session.
You
So
also
that's what
talk
I
about those large groups and small groups of muscles, and
Yes,
you say
sir.
you combine the two together, What is
Yeah.
that,
So like if you're training for the pectoral major, we are training for your chest, which is a pushing muscle. So the moment you start training your pectoral muscle, your deltoid will also be activated and your tricep will also be activated. So the smart idea will be like, to avoid the overtraining and segregating the muscle group, train all your pushing muscle group on a same day, your pulling muscle group on a same day, and your bend and lift muscle group on a same day. And that's why you'll be able to have better chances to avoid the injuries also, and having a better rest period to recover, get stronger, and then come back to your next session also.
So what is a good schedule you would recommend to the, say, beginners or to, say, early people?
So the good schedule is always start with a joint mobilization drills, some stretching drills for a better force production, and then going with a depending on your stage. If you are on a movement training stage, then go for the training a little bit on your strength training, and always end up with the flexibility training, stretches and all.
That's for a day schedule. So how do you divide various days in the week?
So pushing days, pulling days, bend and lifts days.
Okay. So 3 days. So that means you do strength training only thrice in a week?
So depending on your goal. Like a marathon runner, if they are training 2 to 3 days a week, is more than enough for them. But an Olympic lifter has to train almost 5 to 6 days for a strength training. A bodybuilder needs to load the muscle almost 5 to 6 days a week. So it's all depending on your goals, and a person choice is like how exactly he or she want to grow into the strength training. A strength training for a soccer player is different. A strength training for a marathon player is different, and a cricketer or an Olympic lifter is completely different. So I would say 3 to 4 days is a very handsome choice to improve your performance into the strength training zone.
So it depends on your main sport, that if your main sport is say running or cycling, you do 3 days of your main sport and you add 2 days of strength training. But if your main sport is strength and powerlifting, then you do it for 6 days, and maybe do cardio training on maybe 2 days or so in a week's time.
Exactly.
What is the role of stretching, rest, and recovery? And
Sir, stretching is all depending, like, if you're not stretching completely, it's stretching increase your range of motion. If the range of motion is struggling, definitely the force production will also be struggling. So and then better force production Dynamic stretches is always important for the better force production. Then increasing the blood flow to your working muscle is all about the stretching also. If you're not stretching your muscle, then you will be losing your general length of the muscles. Because once you are training with the strength, your muscles start getting stronger and shorter also. If you're not stretching it towards the complete exact length, then definitely the blood circulation will be struggling, the range of motion will be struggling, and the force production will also be struggling. So the stretching is a very important role. The muscles should not be tight.
And the rest and recovery?
Rest and recovery is more important than training also, sir. So rest and recovery is like, you know, it's replenishing your energy system completely. The damage being created into the gym is like, you know, when you're training for the muscles, you're breaking down your muscle tissues. If the muscle tissues are not recovered and not becoming stronger, then you won't be able to perform the task like your last working session. So you need to get more stronger with the proper nutrition, with the proper sleeping pattern, resting completely, and then get stronger again, and then go back to your session.
You know, the rest and recovery is my favorite sport, by the way.
and we should understand that any kind of
training. So
yes.
Any kind of training is a stress to a body.
Yeah.
If we are continuously giving a stress to a body, then the cortisol hormone will be activated, and the body will be producing more glucose production. So that's how resting is very important.
So six days in a week, I train myself for rest and recovery. And seventh day, I take a break and do some workout. No. So my next question.
I'm these days.
Great. So my next question to you, Rahul, is that can old people lift? Like oldies like me, you know, can old people lift?
So they should lift.
They should lift. Okay.
They should lift.
Any special advice for them, you know?
Sir, basically, if they will not lift into their old age or in their young age, you know, they will definitely be losing the lean muscle mass, because with aging, your human growth hormone is on toss, your testosterone level will be on toss, and you will be start losing muscle. So then your joint movements will definitely be struggling. So to maintain the lean muscle mass, every individual should lift. Is like in the old age person, lifting is very important. We have Soni sir, your father-in-law, with us in gym. He is the most experienced and very passionate about the lifting. So lifting gives them a confidence to live. The lifting gives them a better joint movements and the independence to live also. So lifting is very important for an old age person.
So this is even, I want people to know that, you know, that there's no upper age limit to lifting. Old people can also lift. My father-in-law, as he said, he's turned 80 today, and he lifts very, very heavy weights, you know. And it's amazing to see him lift. So there's no upper age limit for lifting. So people should continue to lift. Yes, of course, proper conditioning of the body is required. Proper training is required. Supervision is required. Definitely. Especially for older people. You need to have a personal coach to guide you, to help you with the things, because there the risk of injury is more. And any injury can be more detrimental to an old body than to a younger body, because recovery is delayed and bad. What about young kids? Can young kids lift? There's often a myth that it stunts person's growth and height. You know, that can young kids lift or not? No.
Sir, first of all, when we talk about the younger kids, the general fitness should be prioritized over the performance fitness. If the kid is not fit in general, then the performance fitness will definitely be struggling. And lifting, there is a myth into the market that lifting at an early age is definitely impacting on a height. It's all genetics. Height is all related to your genetics. If the mom and dad is tall, then the kids tend to become a taller. Strength training at a very early age improve the bone density into the kids, improve the lean muscle mass structure into the kids. Easy control on a physical age also. So that's how lifting for a kids is equally as important as for a adult segments completely.
Are the weights lighter? Are the routines slightly different?
So the weight should be lighter. The kid should perform at least 8 to 15 repetition easily. They should not be loaded with the heavier weights like, so, you know, at least a kid should perform 8 repetition easily. So that's how the weight selection for the kids. So the major part of their strength training will be into the endurance segment rather than into the hypertrophy or the strength training. So the strength training for a kid is endurance training with the lighter weights.
So another question that I think most people kind of debate in their mind is that what is the role of supplements when it comes to strength training? Are they really mandatory, or can one do without the supplements?
Sir, if you are able to consume your protein, all the macros, your protein, fats, carbohydrate through the natural resources of the foods, I won't say that supplement is required. I don't think supplement is required. If you are able to consume all your macros through the natural foods, I don't think supplements are required, because okay, the supplement is a person who is vegetarian or is struggling with a variety of foods into the consuming the protein. They can go for a whey protein or some good quality supplements. But yes, if you ask me, supplements are required or not, I would say no. If you are able to consume your all macros through natural foods, no, I would say no.
Yeah, fantastic. So that brings us towards the end of our session. We've already overshot the time. I would request each one of you to give us one line of a take-home message to the audience. Let me start with Sandeep again. What is the final message, one-line message to everyone?
So I think for the uninitiated, for people who are new to the world of fitness, I think there is no better time to start. Don't wait for the New Year resolutions. Don't wait for somebody to kind of poke you to get onto the park. Just go out there, just overcome the inertia and get started. I think that's the most important thing. And for those who are already into this, I think there is just one key message I want to share, that a chain is only as strong as the weakest link in it. So it cannot be just about running. It cannot be just about strength. It cannot be just about nutrition. It cannot be just about rest and recovery. Some people ask me, what is that single most important thing which you will recommend to improve as a runner? I say the question is flawed, because there is no such single important thing. If you're trying to solve for a jigsaw puzzle, there cannot be like, which is the piece which will help you solve the puzzle. You have to get all the pieces right. So just focus on everything in the right balance.
That's a fantastic message. Riti, what do you say?
Very simply, Doc, take care of your body. It's the only place you've got to live in.
Wow,
so that's
wow,
my only message to everybody.
Yeah. That's a very practical and philosophical message combined together. That's, I mean, we live in a body. This is our only instrument that we have to manifest ourselves in this life. We must take care of it. Rahul, what is your word on it?
Sir, continuing with, as Riti ma'am said, is like, we don't live in the big houses. We don't live in the cars. This is the body where we actually live, is like, so this body needs your time. This body needs your investment. So we should always take care of our body and where exactly we are living into.
Fantastic. Anupma, do we have any questions?
I do have a few questions, but if we are running out of time, do we want to sort of take this discussion?
I think what we'll do is we'll have this answer this question in the chat on the comments below on the video. And so we'll skip the question part. So that brings us to the end of the thing. And before we go away, I will like to say that a few words. Final keywords is that I find that motivation is the most important prerequisite for fitness. This is what I said last time also. And regularity is the most important component that will help you reach your target, your goal. Next week, we'll be talking about yoga, Pilates, recovery, and other ignored essentials, which we have touched on. So every speaker said that, yes, mobility, flexibility, rest, recovery is very, very important. So we'll talk in depth next week with the two great experts, with Poonam Singh and Anu Acharya. And last word, that we have started a group called the Live Chat. Please join that group. There are amazing discussions happening over there. And about the next chat also we'll discuss over there. Thank you very much for joining in. Thanks, Anupma, for helping as a co-host. I thank these speakers, Riti, Sandeep, Rahul, to take your time and coming over here, sharing their wonderful information. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you again. We hope to see you coming to our group and helping people over there as well. So guys, thank you very much. So this brings to the end of the show. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.